Hi, welcome to the Keys to Therapy. Today's episode is going to be all about writing notes, which for therapists is one of the most boring, annoying parts of the job. I know most therapists dread having to do notes, stress about getting them done, some get super behind on them, and it's just kind of this constant thing that we have to do, which can be very frustrating. So, with writing notes, they are an essential part of the job, right? Like if we see a client for a therapy session, we have to document certain things to prove that they were there, talk about what we worked on, whatever else, right? It's necessary to have that record. It's also, if you take insurance, like it's a way to validate that the services should be paid for by the insurance company, and it's kind of another way to like record goals and different things that you're doing with the client. And I think sometimes it's also helpful for therapists to have these notes to look back on, to remember what you said last session, or to kind of go back and track what you've done in sessions with clients, different interventions you've used or whatever else. But as practical and useful as they can be, they're still frustrating to do sometimes. They're kind of annoying. They can be very mundane, and knowing that there's a pressure and sometimes a deadline, depending on like where you work or how you work or whatever else, there's just like a lot of obligation that comes with them that makes it a really boring part of the job, and definitely not as fun as some other stuff that we get to do as therapists. So notes also can look very different depending on where you work, how you work, stuff like that. And we'll get into a little bit of that, but I really wanted to have a short and sweet video today on the concept of writing notes, right? Like what are all the things that go into that, and what are some tips that may be able to help you streamline your process of writing notes so it doesn't become so cumbersome. So my first tip on note writing is to create a template. Now, depending on where you work, there may be a template in place already for what should be included in your note. It may be usually the basic stuff that goes into it, like the client's name and the time of the appointment and how many minutes it was and which goals you addressed and what their mental status was like and stuff like that. And so if you work at a place that has a template, I would advise that you get very familiar with that template, and that will help make note writing so much easier, as you already know what you're looking for and what goes into it. You start hitting a rhythm after a bit of time, and that will make it a lot better. If you have to do your own template, say that you have your own practice or the place you're at is very flexible and they let you kind of document everything, then I would absolutely create your own template in a way that works for you. So I know for my practice, I have a template that's mostly checkboxes, and let me tell you that that is life-changing. So a lot of the interventions, put those in checkboxes so I can just click which interventions were used. When it comes to client's mood, I have a ton of different things there. Orientation, like person, place, time, all of that stuff. Boxes there. Suicidal or homicidal ideation, yes or no, with the option to fill in more details if it's a yes. Just really the main things that I have to fill in are the start and end times. Already have the diagnosis, like I said, all of them kind of put in there. And then the content of the session is like the main bulk of it. So again, if you can create a template, cool, do it and make it as simple as possible for yourself. And if you're at a place that already has one, then again, get super familiar with it. Another thing that I have found very, very helpful at pretty much any place I've worked, and I even did this with my own practice actually, was when I had the intake form, because that's where you're doing the most note taking. That's where you need to gather the most information, and it's typically the longest note that you're ever going to write for each client. With that, what I would do, and I strongly suggest you all do too, is regardless of if you made the template or there's one already in the electronic health record system that you're using, print one out, just a blank version. And if the way your system looks is a little off and you really can't print it out, then go in like Microsoft Word or Pages on a Mac and create a blank document where you put each header for all of the sections you're going to have to fill in when you are writing that intake note or assessment note, and leave space there. So you have almost like an intake packet that's blank for you. And I swear this is like a hack that saves a ton of time, because what I tend to do is I have that printed out, and when I review the client's paperwork, I fill in little bits and pieces on my handwritten one that is just kind of copying what was on the computer, because I'm probably not going to be staring at what they wrote when they're in front of me. And then I also put little asterisks, either in a different color, highlight, whatever, of the stuff that I need more details on. So maybe they mentioned a hospitalization 5 years ago. I put a little star next to that because I want to know more about the details of that. So I need to make sure I prioritize that when I meet with them. And so when you actually go later to write your note, one, you've already got all the questions that you needed to answered, and you wrote them down. And when you're doing the note in front of you, you can just copy exactly what you already wrote in the same order and same format that you already wrote it down handwritten wise. So it's going to really, really save you time. And it also helps you get more familiar with the questions too, especially if you're working in a space that you haven't before, or the form's changed, or whatever else. So number one, templates, the best. Really gonna streamline your process. Number two, schedule a time to do your notes. I think that's where a lot of therapists struggle, is they take notes as something that they'll do when they have time instead of actually creating the time to do them. And so what ends up happening is there's always going to be something else to do. There's going to be emails, there's going to be phone calls, there's going to be something that you have to get done. Someone's like coming to your office and knocking on your door. Maybe if you're at home, like me, you gotta let the dogs out, or like, you know, somebody delivered a package while you're busy, or you're switching the laundry, or whatever random stuff I do throughout the day being virtual. And there'll be other stuff that comes up if you don't schedule that time to do your notes. And the next thing you know, the day's gone and you have 7 notes to do, or it's been a couple days and you haven't caught up yet. So put a block somewhere in your schedule, if you can, of when you're gonna do your notes. Maybe you're at a job, because first few jobs I was at, no one ever gave me time to do my notes. It was kind of when you can, or hope you have a cancellation and then you can get them all done then, or you're doing them through lunch, which sucks. So definitely don't recommend that, because you really need to be able to have that time for yourself. But go ahead and put somewhere in your schedule the specific time of day that you're going to be doing your notes. And again, if you're in a place that doesn't really let you, then be very mindful of your time with the client and keep it at 55-minute sessions, and try to do your notes within those 5 minutes. The intake, you're not going to get done in 5 minutes, but for follow-up sessions that are a lot quicker, especially if you're in a place that just lets you load the last note. So their diagnosis and like certain things, maybe the time, most of that's already in there and you just have to kind of tweak it. That's going to be really helpful too. But put it in your schedule, because it is so easy to get extremely behind on notes, and that's going to stress you out. I've seen people at certain places get months behind. And then when there's an audit, or if like their supervisor's reviewing stuff, or something goes on with a client and somebody's in that chart looking at it and they see notes haven't been done, there's so many implications, like legal consequences, all kinds of stuff that could come from that. So really make it a priority to do those notes. I know some people who they do their notes every Friday for the entire week. If that works for them, that's fine. I usually see like 3 people back to back, have an hour break, and then 3 more clients. So if I can't finish the note or start it in those 5 minutes, maybe I filled up my water, went to the bathroom or whatever, then usually the first few minutes of that hour break, I'm doing my note. So that's my built-in time, because I used to only have a lunch break that was half an hour. So I try to keep that first like 15-minute block to go ahead and answer whatever emails I need to do any notes, look at my schedule, and then I have the rest of the time, 45 minutes or whatever, to do my, to have lunch, watch TV, whatever else I want to do. So put that in there, or else you're going to be scrambling to figure out how or when to do them later. The third tip is to dictate your notes if you can. So I know not every software has this capability, but I use Simple Practice for an electronic health record, and on their app actually there's the capability to like type in, like push a box. So for say my session content, and I can hit the microphone and I dictate my note while I'm making a sandwich or sitting outside with the dogs or whatever else. So that has been very helpful for me. It is a little weird because you're like, client disclosed that they had a stressful weekend with their family, period. And you have to say what the punctuation is, but I would take that any day because I could just let it sit there while I'm multitasking if I want to, or just sit outside and not have to be right there on my phone typing everything up, or at the computer for another few minutes typing it up. I could go sit outside for a bit. So yeah, that may be an option too. Maybe you're a slow typer, maybe you're just sick of looking at the computer, whatever it is, but see if that's an option for you to be able to dictate that. And some computers let you do that too. So try to see if that fits with how you would want to work, if that's an option for you. Now, the fourth one, which there's kind of mixed views on it. Some of it's just your personal style. Some of it's your personal preference, but I highly suggest that you do not overdo your notes. I have seen some people's notes before that read like a novel. A whole novel, beginning, middle, end, like plot twist, the whole thing. That is just too much in a lot of ways. That's too much for you to have to sit there and write up an entire page report, 2-page report on every client that you see. It's exhausting. Privacy wise, I feel like, notes are technically private, but depending on where you work and who has access to charts, also if there's an insurance audit, if there's a legal situation, those notes can become public or at least read by other people than you fairly quickly. So would you want all of your stuff out there in the note that somebody's reading in a courtroom out loud? As a therapist, do you want all your words read out loud like that? And how cringy or awkward some of that might be. So when you're writing notes, you don't want to overdo it and have all of the content to prove, look how much we talked about in the session. And I've noticed sometimes with newer therapists or therapists who are in a newer setting, almost feel the need to overcompensate, and so then they write a lot more to be like, see, look, we talked about all of these things, we did therapy. And that's just not good for you or the client, and it's just too much. So you also don't want to make it so minimal. I mean, I've seen people's notes that they're only check boxes, and I'm like, what they actually talk about here? And if somebody audited you and was like, would you actually do this session? Might not be able to say, well, we talked about family and relationships in school. It's like, oh, okay, but that really doesn't give you much. So if you can Goldilocks it, not too hot, not too cold, and find something in the middle, that will be really helpful. So what I would say would be to, with the notes, if you were going to have a focus, especially for that content section of here's a summary of the session, to focus on the following things. One, justifying the diagnosis, or explaining what the symptoms are. Client continues to report depression. Client's score on the GAD was a 17. Whatever type of thing that's going to show this is why this person still meets the criteria for this diagnosis. List the symptoms out. That is going to be really helpful because it's more clinical that way too, instead of getting caught up in the drama of whatever story that they told. The other one is to share your interventions. What interventions did you use? So clinician utilized CBT with client to help challenge and reframe their negative thoughts regarding their body. Okay, well that tells me that they were having negative thoughts about their body. So maybe there's some anxiety or depression there. You use CBT, you taught them techniques. So that's a therapy session. So definitely list out some of the interventions that you used, because that's really helpful. Even if you have them in that checkbox somewhere in there, it's still nice to explain a little bit about how it was. Also because, like I said earlier, it's a reminder for you. There's sometimes that I'm teaching clients the same techniques, so then I'll be like, did I talk to them about this grounding one yet? And I can go back and look in their notes and be like, oh yeah, I talked about that like 4 months ago. So it's a good reminder for you as well as a clinician, but just list in there a little bit of whatever it is that you taught them or reviewed with them or educated them on. And the last part would be, what goals were you working on? So if you said something like, client engaged in an exercise on assertive communication and role played a confrontation with clinician to increase their assertiveness and build confidence, whatever, like, that's great, because that's going to show too that whatever those goals were you initially listed, like the reason that they're there is continuing to be met in these sessions. And you want the notes to be as clinical as possible. So try not to insert your judgment too much, just more of like what you're observing and what the client's self-reporting. That will also help you from getting too lost in the drama of writing the actual session notes. So that's kind of it. Notes really don't have to be that complicated. They do not need to be that stressful. They do not even need to be that time consuming, as long as you stay on top of them. So yeah, it's a lot of work, especially when you're newer, or like I said, you're in a new setting, because then you're trying to figure out how do I write these notes? What are they supposed to look like? What's my supervisor expecting? What if I get audited is like the big one I hear from everybody. So what if my client wants their notes for their own record, which they're entitled to have, unless you think there's some specific type of harm that's going to come from them reading them. But, you know, keep that in mind too as you're writing them. Make sure that you're, again, very clinical and factual and not inserting judgment. But for the most part, notes really aren't that bad. It's a necessary part of the job. Yes, it's boring. Yes, it's time consuming sometimes. Sure, it's annoying and they never end. Accurate. But they don't need to be that bad. So find a system that works for you. Stay on top of it. And don't let notes be the thing that makes you feel iffy about this profession. Don't let that be the thing that like stresses you out or takes up too much of your time. So I hope those tips help today. Maybe if you can streamline some things, get some templates going, you'll start feeling a little bit better about your process. So my dog investigates my stuff. But good luck to you. Try to put some of these things in place and get some of your free time back, some of your life back. Don't let notes take over. But yeah, so if you want to join my Facebook group, I have a Facebook group for therapists. That link will be below. I also have an email list. I only send an email out once a month because nobody wants their inbox flooded. So you can also sign up for that below. Just kind of stay on top of different things that are going on, different offers that are coming up, and possibly some different things that I'm doing next year. Be the first to know. But do any of the things that speak to you. Subscribe too, so you can stay on top of some different episodes that are coming up. And I will see you next time. Good luck.